Let me start with a quick introduction. Hi, my name is Aaron. I review things. Yeah, that was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be. I guess I should give you a reason why I'm reviewing things, and I think I'd have to say that simple version, I have a webcam, internet connection, no one can stop me. A longer version, well, ever since I've been up in college and Never Ever Land, I've really been out of the pop culture loop. And so I thought, what better way to get back into it than to critically analyze anything and everything in my life until I spiral into the nothingness of detail that haunts obsessive compulsives. Yeah. Anyways, on with our first review. The Twilight Saga, Eclipse. I really wanted to start out on a high note with this series, you be really excited and bombastic, but my god, if this movie didn't just suck the life out of me. Here, let me start with this. I own all of these books. Hardcover. First edition. They are all first printing except for Twilight. New Moon is signed. I hate these books. Be gone! Poof. But I can't help myself. I got the first book a long time before the series was very popular on recommendation from a friend. And say what you will, if you're just running through that book, it is like crack. And not really that horrible if you don't turn on your brain. And I was just a wee sophomore at the time, so not a very difficult task. But every book after that, I really had to force myself through. But as these books became more popular than God, I felt an obligation to get through them, just to say that yes, I had suffered through them, and I had suffered through them first. Reading through New Moon when it came out, I was already quickly realizing how bad this series was and why it was so bad. And it didn't even get unbearably bad until Eclipse, where the shit really starts to shine through. And Breaking Dawn, just Breaking Dawn. You know, viewers, you know. Let's start with a quick overview of the plot, shall we? It won't take long, there's not too much to go through. First, the characters. At the center of the story, you have the resident doormat and generally horrible person, Bella Swan. She's a fairly shameless author avatar, which is strange because I can't imagine any author wanting to portray themselves as such a hopelessly vapid character. On the surface, she has precisely zero defining character traits, unless you really want to dig into her underlying sociopathic tendencies. But more on that later. At her side, you have the almost as vapid Edward Cullen, whose existence is causing an entire generation of young women to grow up thinking that Robert Pattinson is actually attractive and not just a pale, skinny white boy with awkward chest hair and too much hair gel. He's the main vamp of the series, and by God does he let you know it, he's dangerous and can't be trusted. Bah! The only thing I see is some whiny, overprotective, incredibly stalker-esque Gary Stu. And I'm not kidding about the stalker thing. If this guy had a theme song, it would probably be Every Breath You Take by the Police. The last character that Stephenie Meyer bothers to give any meaningful screen time to is Jacob, the token magical Native American character from the token magical Native American tribe, the Quileutes. Whatever. In order to establish some semblance of narrative tension, Meyer turned the real-life tribe into a vehicle for werewolves, the enemies to vampires in this universe, of course. Their not-so-secret secondary purpose in the story is to have an excuse to fill the screen with buff, topless men engaging in the most homoerotic roughhousing this side of Brokeback Mountain. Jacob himself is inexplicably attracted to Bella, like every single man in Forks. Jacob has the distinction in the story as the only character to show the barest hint of a third dimension, only to have it destroyed in this movie. More on that later, though. The basic plot of this movie is that there's tension between Jacob and Edward over who gets to mark Bella as their territory, and there's tension between Edward and Bella because Bella keeps on stomping her feet like a 2-year-old demanding to get changed into a vampire, because God forbid she should have to grow old like the rest of us. Edward refuses because he thinks vampires are soulless, and if he changes Bella, she'll lose her soul. Wow, Edward's really a ray of sunshine, isn't he? He eventually caves under pressure from the vampiric mafia, the Volturi, headed by someone no one cares about, but hey look, it's Dakota Fanning! The only person in this movie with any acting talent. I know it's hard to tell under all the bad writing and pounds of mascara, but that's definitely her. Wait, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Bella and Edward. Well, Edward eventually caves under the demands, but only under the condition that they get married first, and that's because Edward's old-fashioned and Bella wants to hump him before she's a vampire, which I guess makes sense. I mean, you don't want to have an indestructible hymen for all eternity. But they argue about this for a long time, but they eventually agree on the order that they're going to do marriage, then human sex, then vampirization, then vampire sex. That doesn't stop her from trying to jump his bones prematurely, though. Jacob is supposed to be a factor in here, but his basic role in this movie is to get cock-teased to no end by Bella until his blue balls burst. Bella's already decided on Edward to share in her codependency, but she still has no impulse control, so he gets led on continually. His other role in the movie is to succumb to writer-on-board syndrome, since Stephenie Meyer couldn't stand to have a likable character in this farce. As such, he goes around being a huge asshole, which is, to my surprise, toned down a bit in the movie. Oh well, it just makes the talkie scenes that much more boring. Assholes are at least interesting. And that about covers the romance plot. The action plot, and I use the term action as lightly as possible, is that some vampire chick is out to kill Bella, but since Bella is being protected by Edward's creepy vampire family, she decides to raise an army of newborn vampires, which, contrary to every vampire story ever, are stronger than much older vampires. This leads up to a fight at the end in which the newborn vampires and the head bitch vampire are wholesale slaughtered with no casualties to the wolves or the Cullens. I like how supposedly life-threatening situations are settled quickly with absolutely no aftermath to anyone that cares, except for, you know, the bereaved families of the newborn vampires that were slaughtered by the Cullens and the werewolves. But they weren't in love with Bella, so who cares? And now, the review. In order to retain the slightest semblance of reviewerly rigor, I'm going to split this review up into 5 sections. Plot, characters, screenwriting, acting and directing, and visuals and audio. Maybe that way I'll be able to get through even half the stuff that sucks about this movie.